Wow. You know, synchronicity is an amazing thing, right? I send Cindy what I think I'm going to talk about like a month in advance. And it really is interesting how things just come together when we're actually sort of open and willing to be guided by that wisdom that is always available to us. So that particular song, which totally got me, by the way, you guys, really is the heart of what I want to speak to today, which is about how do we actually show up for each other? Like really, not sort of, not kind of, not from our place of safety and understanding what we think the world can be, but how do we actually show up in real time with what is actually going on for people in the world, in our own life, and yet hold the higher watch at the same time. So this week, we're looking at this idea of constructive conflict. Anyone else have sort of a moment with that? Constructive conflict. Especially for spiritual communities, we're conflict averse. Conflict is bad, peace is good. We're supposed to be Om Shanti Om, I don't move off of my center. And so what can happen in spiritual communities is if we bypass around the idea that conflict actually is in service to our greatest and highest good, if we bypass around that concept, then we're missing out on a whole avenue for growth and expansion. So all too often, we are this, right? And in this corner, still undefeated, Frank's long-held beliefs. And you can see, anybody ever feel like that? Oh no, I'm not moving off of this position. I know I'm right. And if anybody comes at me, I'm gonna come out swinging, right? So I know that we have been working together as a community around this for 3 weeks now. And I have been listening and hearing. Now, I know that within the book itself, there are some people who might actually like or dislike or not so crazy about Adam Grant's book itself. But what I have heard universally from everyone is this idea of rethinking is just so powerful. And that is what we're focused on, right? We are focused on what does it mean for us to move past our thoughts and our beliefs, and we have been talking about how we get stuck in these modes where I am right and you are wrong, or, oh no, I don't want anybody to not like me, so I'm going to say whatever they want to hear in order to make it all peace, love, and understanding. But it's not real. It's not real. So he talks about that as the preacher, the prosecutor, and the politician. And we all step into these modes. And the idea, what we're practicing right now as a community, is that we're listening and watching for when we step into these modes. What is it that triggers the, oh, no, I am right in our heart? What triggers us into these spaces where we're not actually able to be present to constructive conflict, to constructive conversations? The other big piece that Adam Grant has, let me put it this way, Adam Grant talks about it, and I am making it a big deal, which is that who we are is not a question of our opinion, but who we are should be based on what we value. And when we keep coming back to that again and again and again, it provides an avenue for growth for ourselves, for other people, and more importantly, I believe, so that we can create a truly safe space for those who come into our community, for those who come into our orbit. How do we actually create a space that is large enough and deep enough and wide enough to hold all of it? And it asks us to be grounded in our values, not in our opinion about something. So it is Rosh Hashanah, right? L'Shana Tova. Everybody say that back to me. L'Shana Tova. It means a good year. May it be a good year, right? And I'm holding that for all of us, that may it be a good year. And I know that some people have been sharing with me how this idea of rethinking and thinking again has been challenging. Anybody in here finding it challenging? Right? This idea of like, oh, wow, I actually do that. Oh, wow, look at my bias there. Oh, wow, I wasn't paying attention, and look at what I stepped into because I wasn't paying attention in that moment. It can be challenging when we're asked to examine how we are actually showing up in the world, and that's what we're inviting ourselves into. And again, remember, we're doing this in a safe space with each other. As I talked about last week, is it okay to make a mistake? Yeah. Is it okay to be wrong? Yeah. Right? I don't know how many, I've been talking to people and, oh, I saw that I do this, and now I'm beating myself up. I'm feeling shame and guilt, and I'm feeling not enough. And when you're doing that to yourself, guess what? You're prosecuting yourself. You're making yourself wrong. And that is not the mode we want to be in, either for ourselves or for how we're interacting with the world. So there's a ritual that happens on Rosh Hashanah. Now, the thing to keep in mind is that there are millions of people on the planet right now who are stepping into Rosh Hashanah and stepping into the days of awe, and it is a time of deep introspection. For the Jewish faith, the days of awe are the 10 of the holiest days of the year. Now, that energetic is available to all of us. What is being created by those people who are sitting in prayer and doing the work within the structure and understanding of their faith tradition is creating an opening for us to be able to access for ourselves. We get to ride that wave that is being created right now. So there is a ritual that happens today on the day of Rosh Hashanah. Right? Which is called tashlich. And what that is where you go to a moving body of water. Jews love rituals. You go to a moving body of water, and you take, typically we use breadcrumbs or pieces of bread, and you sit there and you throw into the water whatever it is that you don't want to carry anymore. It's kind of their version of the burning bowl, right? And so I want to offer that practice to this community as when you find yourself beating yourself up, when you find yourself prosecuting yourself for the things that you're noticing about how you automatically have been moving through the world, how the autopilot of your life is becoming obvious, and perhaps it's hard to see the autopilot of your life. I want you to use that image of taking the shame or the guilt or the I'm not good enough, whatever that story is that gets triggered, and sending it out into the moving waters of consciousness and saying, I can start anew. That is what we believe in Unity, that we can always start anew. But we can't do that if we're not willing to admit that perhaps we were wrong. We can only start anew if we actually pay attention. So we talk about living an authentic life, and it's a big deal for a lot of spiritual communities, this idea of authenticity. And what really struck me about last week's reading, which was all about imposter syndrome and all of that, right? Everybody remember what we were looking at last week? What came through for me through Cindy's wonderful Getting Real with Race combination of Getting Real with Race and the book study, which is drop-in, by the way. So anybody who wants to just drop in addition to your other book study, you can drop into Cindy's and you can get a different flavor of where the focus is. But what became very clear to me was that the theme of that was really about how can we live our most authentic self? How can we show up in the world with the most authenticity? And when imposter syndrome, and let's be really clear, imposter syndrome is not a real syndrome. It's not some, clinical diagnosis, right? It is something that has been created in popular culture to explain a phenomena that so many of us feel, particularly those of us who are part of some sort of minority. There is this sense that nothing we do will ever be good enough. There is this sense that no matter how hard we try at something, it will never be good enough. Now, the tricky thing about what Adam Grant is putting forward and what society, I put that in quotes, says about imposter syndrome is that it somehow makes it about me. It's my problem that I feel like an imposter. It's something that I need to address within myself, that I feel like an imposter. Is that really true? Do we live in a vacuum? Do we experience life in a vacuum? Is it really on me that I might feel as a woman, as a queer person, that there are things that have been challenged about my sense of self, that I have been told are not real, that my relationship isn't real, that my love isn't real, that my understanding of how I love has no value in the world? It's toxic. It's a toxic culture, and that culture is what makes me feel like an imposter. Does everybody see that? And it's huge. I mean, this was such an aha moment for me. I totally got to think again. Because so much of what we teach in Unity is that it's us, right? It's us. And that is still true. But we cannot deny that there is a culture that we are swimming in. And if we don't pay attention to that culture, if we don't pay attention to what we're being expected to conform to, then we take it all on personally. And I think it's mine alone. I am the only one that feels like an imposter. Is that true? No, right? I know that's not true. And I know that even people who live into the power structure, where are my white straight males in here who we love? Let me say that we love you. How many of you have felt like an imposter? Because the standard of what it means to quote unquote, quote, be a white straight male, if you don't live into that, then guess what? You feel like an imposter as well. It's all a construct. Can you feel that? And we don't think of it as a construct. We think of it as the air that we're swimming in and the water that we're breathing, but it is made up. Can I get an amen? Because here's the truth. Authenticity is the enemy to conformity. And conformity keeps us powerless. Conformity makes us just go along with whatever's going on in the world. Authenticity invites us to step into something in a very different way. And it makes us uncomfortable. To be our most authentic self means that we have to stand there. And we have to let people not agree with us. We have to let people not like us. We have to let people do whatever people are going to do. But if we can stand in our own authenticity, then we are actually bringing healing and medicine to the planet. Now, here's the piece that I think is important to us as a community. Do we want to be a toxic community? Do we want to be, as a spiritual community that is continuing to perpetuate these ideas about age, about gender, about your sexual orientation, about the color of your skin? We don't, and yet we are all caught in blinders about this. We have to be willing to do the work that says, oh, there's other lived experiences out there. Not just mine. And just because it doesn't line up with my lived experience does not mean that that lived experience is any less valid or any less important. It is the diverse voices that actually are going to make us as a community grow and be dynamic and be impactful in the world. All right? I'm on my preacher mode today. Can you feel it? So, values versus opinions. And I really just want you to keep asking yourself, is it really a value that I have? Or is it an opinion that I have? Is it an opinion that I have that somebody who's older than I am knows more than me? Is it an opinion that somebody who's older than me is too old to actually be part of the next wave of consciousness? What are our biases? Where are we engaged in something that is limiting not only us, but the people who we're interacting with? That age thing hit a button out here. I can see people reacting, right? But it goes both ways. Our biases can be that being older is a wonderful thing, wise elder, or our bias could go the other way, which is, oh boy, those people, right? They're just so not with it. But they're just opinions. They're just opinions about something. They're generalizations about something. So what if we're focused on the lived experience? What if we're focused on creating space for everyone? And I know that that seems really hard. But as a spiritual community, I honestly believe that this is our calling. That we are being invited to hold that high watch that truly builds a world for everyone. And the place we have to start is right here with each other. Right? This is where it begins. This is where it starts. So I used this quote last week, and I'm using it again because I think it's just so important. If the gut response is to deny the existence of the problem, the conversation never happens. The answer has been marked and won't be changed. So all of those times in your heart this is not about being a bad person. Can I make that clear? But all those times when you were like, oh, well, other people do that, but I don't do that. I'm not one of those people, and then you just move on? Well, guess what? You're actually not engaging in the conversation. You're not actually engaging in what is it that's going to make this place a better world. I am blessed that I have a wife who is of color. And I thought I was enlightened about race. And let me tell you, after living with a woman of color for 18 years, I can tell you that I have been learning a lot. Every single day. Her lived experience is something that I'm not even, I'm living it adjacent. And yet, it has profoundly impacted me because it impacts her, and I love her, and I don't want her to be in pain. I can't tell you the number of places. The big one is we go into restaurants, we sit down, and waiters ignore her. They only talk to me, right? They only talk to me. They'll come up to the table, and they'll just tell everything to me. And when she finally made me aware, I guess Cindy wants to give an amen to that, right? When she made me aware of it, because I really wasn't paying attention, I wasn't. When she made me aware of it, I first noticed it, and I was like, oh, wow, this is crazy. Number one, that I didn't see it, and number two, that it's even happening. So then what do? Do I just say, well, there's nothing to be done about it? No, well, you guys know me. That's not what I do, right? So if we're sitting down, there's lots of ways that I've learned to sort of navigate this. One of this is if they're just talking to me and they're not talking to her, all I do is look at her. All I do is look at her. I refuse to look at the waiter. All I do is look at her. And eventually, they start looking at her. Because clearly, I am looking at her, right? We walk up to a place to buy something at a counter, never fails. They're not going to ask her if she needs help before they're going to ask me. They're always going to ask me first. And I will just say, ask her. She's right here. Ask her. Not in a mean way, not in a confrontational way, but in a, she's right here, talk to her. They put the check down in front of me, you guys. I mean, what is wrong with people? That is just crazy as far as I'm concerned. I'm not going to have anything to do with that check. That is her purview. That is her purview. So if we don't recognize the existence of the problem, we cannot even begin to have the conversation. We cannot begin to even have any sort of shift or change. And let me say this too. It's like what I'm inviting us into is to be able to say, I see you, I respect you, Tell me more, and I can think again. That's what I'm inviting us into. I see you, I respect you, tell me more, I can think again. Because we all have a role that we can play in truly making this a world that works for everyone. Even if it's as simple as a waiter that won't look at her being a waiter that I will not engage with. That is as simple as, and it gets awkward, and that's okay. I'm okay with the awkwardness. Right? I'm okay with the awkwardness of that. Like just looking at her. It's really fascinating watching how it forces a different dynamic to happen at the table. So constructive conflict is respectful, always. That's really the foundation of it, is it's respectful. We're not coming from a place where we think the other person is an idiot. We're not coming at it from a place of, I'm right, you're wrong. We're coming at constructive conflict from a place of respect. We are also coming at it from a place where we are looking for commonality. So in the chapters, they talk about the negotiators and the really excellent negotiators versus the average negotiators. The difference is that the excellent negotiators are looking for the places of connection. They are looking for the places where there is agreement, so that from there you can begin to move and shift. Both parties can begin to move and shift into a new understanding, so that we're open to new ideas and new perspectives. This came, Cindy Hall, thank you for this. So this is a rule from where? It came from Shay. Thank you, Shay. You're not here today, but thank you. I've added this. I'm going to add this into all the book study agreements, class agreements. So in your book studies, I want you to add this in. I've been reaching out to facilitators, which is assume good intentions. No matter what people say. That waiter who is ignoring my wife isn't necessarily doing it because they are an overt racist. They are doing it because our culture is toxic and has taught them that I somehow, with my lighter skin, have more value than my wife does. It's not that that person is evil or bad or any of that. Can we assume good intentions? Now, that doesn't mean there aren't people out there without good intentions. But can we start from the place of assuming good intentions? Especially, look around at each other, right? Especially within our own community. Can we give people the benefit of the doubt? Can we give them the space to be wrong? Can we give people a space to make mistakes? Because guess what? If we give it to them, we're also giving it to ourselves. And who would we be if we were okay with being wrong and we didn't carry it around with us and whip ourselves and punish ourselves and send ourselves down into that dark hole? Y'all know what I mean with the dark hole, right? That self-recrimination. Oh, why did I? I should have. Oh, why didn't I? What if we can actually create a space where it's okay to be wrong and to own what is ours to own? To own that it's something I need to learn. It's something I need to grow into. And in that growing, being willing to change. That's the biggest piece. I teach advocacy and allyship for LGBTQ+ throughout Unity, nationally and in the region and at different churches. We're going to do it in January, everybody. And one of the things that shocks me over and over and over again is I do a lot of talking about pronouns, which I'm going to talk more about next week too. But I talk about pronouns and I talk about what it's like to have your identity constantly under attack. To constantly have people not honoring your authenticity. And all of these Unity communities are beautiful, and they nod and they smile and they say, yes. And I say, you want to know the simplest thing you can do? In your Zoom, add your pronouns after your name. How hard is that? Right? How hard is that to add your pronouns after your name? And people say to me, but everybody knows my pronouns. Do you hear the bias? Just because your identity aligns with what people send back to you does not mean that we can't create a safe space for those who necessarily don't get that gift all the time. How hard is it to put your pronouns in there, which says, I'm a safe space, which says, I understand that people are going to make assumptions about things, and I'm willing to help draw a line so that those opinions about looking a certain way means that your gender is a certain thing can be broken open. And I got to tell you, I go back a couple months later. Do you know how many people actually have pronouns in their Zoom chat, in their Zoom name? 0. 0. Because it's not really impacting me. It's not part of my lived experience. So if it's not part of my lived experience, then it must not be that important. That's what we do, right? It's not part of my lived experience. It's not part of my friend's lived experience. Well, you're never going to get a larger circle of friends if you don't open up. If you don't open up and say, I'm a safe space for those who perhaps are constantly under assault. Imagine what it would be like to constantly be under assault for the color of your skin, for your gender identity, constantly. So can we create a space that truly is welcoming and inclusive? And yeah, it means that we have to step out of our comfort zone. It means that we have to ask questions, which I'm available for. You can come talk to me anytime about pronouns. What are you talking about, DeeAnn? I will be happy to talk to you, right? So avoidance of conflict is not peace. Really take that in. Avoiding conflict is not peace. Engaging with diverse perspectives is how we grow. And as a society, we have lost the nuance, we have lost our capacity to be able to have respectful disagreements. We do not know how to do that anymore. So my invitation to all of us is that we take that on. And that we just practice, we can practice right here because we can make this space safe, right? That we practice right here. You want to tell me there's nobody in here who you've had some conflict with ever? I don't believe it. Avoidance of conflict is not peace. So how do we actually create a container where we can all grow? So because it's Rosh Hashanah, I'm bringing in all the Jewish stuff today, right? So there is a story in the Talmud. So the Torah is very important in the Jewish tradition, but almost as important, or actually more important, is the Talmud, which is where all the commentary about the Torah goes. And the Talmud is like centuries of commentary. And Jews love to argue, right? It's sort of built into the DNA to question everything, and they will argue. Present-day scholars will argue with 3rd century BCE scholars who wrote in the Talmud, right? So that questioning, that constant looking is built in. And there's a story in the Talmud about these two, what would you call them, Anne? Two schools of thought within Judaism. Hillel, and I can't remember the name of the other one. And they're often at odds. They often do not agree on what it is that the Torah is actually saying. And they were in the midst of some sort of long-winded debate about an esoteric thing, of course, because, that's what we get fixated on. And in the midst of the continued conversation, a voice spoke and said, "These and these are the word of the living God." These and these are the words of the living God. Can we make space for the ambiguity? Can we make space for what it is that we don't know, right? The paradox of our lives and how they intersect and how they come together. What it is asking of us is that we continue to open ourselves up to say, I don't know, I could be wrong, What am I assuming? How can I really listen? Listen to the lived experience. Listen to the pain of someone who is misgendered all the time. And you putting your pronouns in your Zoom thing means that they know you're an ally. Is that small? Is that insignificant? It's huge. It's huge. These are the kinds of things that we can step into where it really is about caring for each other. It really is about creating a space where each of us gets to show up as our most authentic self. These and these are the living expression of the divine. Rumi says, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. That's what Adam Grant is inviting us into that field, that it's not about I'm right and you're wrong, but it's about stepping out into a space that is a field. I love that it's a field, because that means it's large enough and big enough and wide enough. There's room for everybody there, right? It's limitless. Nobody's gender identity is actually threatening you, right? Really not. I was reading, there was a thing on Twitter, and it said, a historical look at how men are becoming effeminate. And I thought, did I end up on the wrong side of Twitter? And I clicked on it, and it was this from newspapers that go back through the centuries about how women are becoming too manly and men are becoming effeminate. And it goes back to the 1500s. Right? The 1500s, people have been worrying that men aren't manly enough and women aren't womanly enough. Now, if that's not a construct that needs to be propped up over and over and over again, I don't know what is. Right? Right? So that field is where I'm going to invite all of us to meet each other. So take a breath with me. I'm going to invite the choir to come on up while I'm doing the affirmations. I want everybody to just breathe into this idea that we are big enough, we are caring enough, we are large enough, we are welcoming enough, we are authentic enough to make space for everyone, and that nothing gets taken away from us. So the first affirmation is, I am willing to be more authentic.
I am willing to be more authentic.
I am willing to be a space for your authenticity. And say that to somebody. I am willing to be a space for your authenticity. That's a good one, huh? I am willing. We have consensus. We got the approval, right? I am willing to think again.
I am willing to think again.
And so it is. Amen.